Well, that's Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 339, Take the Lombre Home. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through a forest on their way to Petalburg now, as May admired the two ribbons that she currently had in her ribbon case, happy to have won the Verdurf contest. Max congratulates May, stating that he knew May's contest wins would make their parents very proud, and May thanked Max for the compliment. As for Ash, he was very hyped to get to Petalburg City, constantly reminding the rest of the gang that that was their next destination, with Max commenting that Ash shouldn't be super excited to go back since Norman would beat his ass, commenting that Ash wouldn't be nearly as lucky against his father Norman than as May was in her last contest. Ash knew that Norman would be a tough opponent, but nonetheless, he was confident that he could beat Norman and prove Max wrong, stating that his victory would go just as good, if not better, than May's victory. Ash gets so excited for his upcoming battle with Norman that he begins to get thirsty and asks Brock for some water. And Brock goes to get him some from the canteen that they were currently sharing, but as soon as he shakes the canteen, he informs the gang that it was empty, which meant that they were out of water. Ash, May, and Max begin to panic at this, but Brock didn't panic whatsoever, stating that he, now being more accustomed to water Pokemon since he owned both Lotad and Mudkip, would be able to use his water trainer abilities to find a water source to get some water from to refill their canteens. And he then ran off as Ash and the gang chased after him so he didn't get lost. As Ash and the gang and Brock ran, Brock revealed that he actually knew of a world-famous freshwater spring nearby and was taking them all there, with Brock adding that the spring was so famous it was listed as one of the top 100 famous in the whole world. Speaking of this spring, we then see none other than Team Rocket, who were currently at the spring and were bottling water, as well as boxing it so that they could steal it and sell it, wanting to sell it since they knew of how popular the spring was, so they figured water from it would sell for a lot of money. As they did this, and talked about how hot it was out in the forest and how much money they were going to make, as well as the fact that they were thinking about making a trap in case someone came by and tried to steal the water that they were stealing. Coincidentally, they then spotted Ash and the gang approaching the spring. So they decided to put their trap plan into action and stop Ash and the gang before they could get to their water, with the trap simply just being them catching them off guard. With a classic hole trap, so they dug the hole and hid behind some of the boxes of water, waiting for Ash and the gang to arrive and fall in, deciding to finally take the opportunity to capture Pikachu when that happened. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were continuing on towards the spring through the dense woods, which May and Max were frightened by because it seemed so big and endless. But Ash, on the other hand, was just tired from all the walking. He wasn't terrified whatsoever, nor was Pikachu. And everyone else shared his sentiment of being tired of walking, especially when they had no water to recharge. Brock tried to motivate everyone by saying that they just had to be getting closer to the spring, when just then, a Zubat suddenly flew out of some bushes and freaked everyone out, even Ash, because they were all startled. Well, everyone except for Brock, that is, because Brock just claimed that there was no reason to be scared, since it was only a Zubat, and May got a little annoyed by Brock being so nonchalant about a Zubat, because she was terrified by it. And May and Max also pointed out to Ash that it seemed as though he was scared, just like them, based on how he reacted to the Zubat. Just then, Brock turned around as he heard something behind him, and this turned out to be none other than a Solrock, and it was flying off. Everyone examines the Solrock in awe, because they had never seen one before, but then it begins to float away even faster. So Ash and the gang try their best to chase after it, but they end up falling into a hole trap dug by Team Rocket along the way. As if on cue, Team Rocket appears from where they were hiding in the bushes, and make fun of Ash and the gang for falling in the hole, and praise themselves on how easily they were able to capture them before Meowth takes out a net and grabs Pikachu out of the hole with it. However, an instant later, a fire spin suddenly strikes Team Rocket from out of nowhere, knocking them down on the ground, causing Meowth to drop the net, which breaks on impact as it falls down into the hole, allowing Ash to reclaim Pikachu as he jumped into his arms. Team Rocket soon get up, and they notice the Solrock appear behind them, knowing that that's where the fire spin came from, so Team Rocket begins to angrily yell at it. While Ash and gang were thankful for the Solrock for helping, and they took the opportunity to climb out of the hole, while Team Rocket was distracted yelling. And since Team Rocket was still busy yelling at the Solrock, Ash took the opportunity to scan it with his Pokédex, and he learned that Solrock could read people's minds. Jessie and Meowth began to switch from yelling at the Solrock to making fun of it, with James adding that they should get rid of it and punish it for what it had done. So, James sends out his Cacnea, although Cacnea hugs James before it can do anything. James quickly pulls it off, though, and tells it to use Pin Missile directly on Solrock, and it obliges, but the Pin Missile just bounces off, having no effect. While James was angry about this, Meowth was excited at the fact that Team Rocket could potentially capture a Pokemon that had the ability to bounce some attacks off, so Meowth suggested that they capture it, and they all agreed, leaping towards it, but Solrock was angry, so it launched a Solar Beam to send Team Rocket blasting off after charging it up. The Solar Beam also caused a huge cloud of smoke to form, and when this cleared, Ash and the gang saw that Solrock had disappeared now. Ash and the gang tried to call for it, but there was of course no response, and Ash was disappointed by this, as he wanted to thank it for saving Pikachu. Brock admitted he did want to find Solrock as well. However, he suggested that they wouldn't be able to find Solrock when they were thirsty as fuck, so they should instead just go to the spring to get some water and then go after Solrock, and Max and May instantly agreed, so Ash was forced to as well. However, when Ash and the gang eventually managed to make it to the spring, they were very shocked to see that it was entirely dried up. Ash and the gang began to stress out, wondering what could have caused the spring to dry up, when suddenly they noticed a valley below them that contained a village, with May being the first one to notice the village. And Brock comes to the conclusion that there had to have been water in the village, so they decide to go there. But when they arrive in the village, they find it extremely weird, because all the roofs of the houses were lily pads, and even worse was the town seemed pretty much deserted, with there being no one outside, and there was also a river underneath a bridge in the village, in the town, but it had also dried up. Ash then asks Pikachu to smell for any water, hoping that this river wasn't the village's only source of water, but unfortunately, Pikachu finds absolutely no water, and it can't smell any either. However, Max then got an idea, realizing that water Pokemon would probably be best at finding any water sources as opposed to Pikachu, and Ash agreed, as did Brock and May, as they all sent out their water Pokemon, with him sending out his Corphish, Brock sending out his Mudkip and Lotad, and May realizing that she didn't have any water Pokemon, although Skitty then forcibly pops out of May's Pokeball. May asked it if it wanted to help, and it nodded, so she allowed Skitty to help. Brock was extremely confident that the water Pokemon would be able to find water if it was close, as Corphish immediately started digging into the dry riverbed to try and find water, with Ash commending this idea, stating that there was probably water underground. Suddenly, Skitty smells something and rushes off, leading Ash and the gang to think that Skitty may have somehow smelled water. So, they went to go follow Skitty, and Mudkip and Lotad followed Skitty as well, although they soon went off into different directions to look for other sources of water. Ash, on the other hand, stayed behind to see what Corphish would find, but Ash then looked down to see that Corphish had found something already, but it was just a pot that was buried underground, and Corphish placed it on his head and emerged from underground, very happy, although Ash and Pikachu just sighed in annoyance at the fact that Corphish had found absolutely nothing useful. As for Skitty, it turned out that all that it smelled was not water, but some flowers, and it went over by the house where these flowers were and started to sniff them, which annoyed May, who told it that they were looking for water, not flowers. Ash and the gang then go to see what Mudkip and Lotad had found, and saw that they had in fact found a well in the middle of town, and everyone was pleased by this, but when Brock looked inside the well, much to his disappointment, he found that the well was dried up, just like the river, and everyone sighed in disappointment. Suddenly though, Lotad then jumps onto a bucket that was on the well, and he just sits there. Everyone simply stares at Lotad for a while, and Max asked what it was doing, thinking that Lotad perhaps wanted to get everyone's attention for something. And Lotad was about to say something, it seemed like, but then it started to freak out as the bucket started to wobble, and it eventually fell into the well. Ash and the gang tried to reach for Lotad, but they couldn't get it in time before a crash was heard at the bottom of the well, signifying Lotad had in fact fell. Ash and the gang couldn't help but laugh at Lotad's bad luck, although Brock of course wanted to save his Pokemon, so he told Lotad to get inside the bucket and said he would pull it up. So Brock manages to throw a rope down and connect it to the bucket and uses it to pull the bucket up. And once the bucket was safely on the well again, Brock thanked Lotad for at least trying, noticing that it probably fell into the well somewhat on purpose, so that it could see if there was any water deep within the well. Just then, though, Lotad started to glow out of nowhere, and everyone watched in awe as Lotad evolved into Lombre, leading Ash to scan it with his Pokedex to learn more about it, and Brock to happily greet his new Pokemon. Just then, an old woman appears, named Tallulah, and comes rushing down the road towards them, having a lily pad on her head. And she was calling for Lombre, excited to see it apparently, and when she made it up to Ash and the gang, she immediately pushed them all to the ground and got on her knees to pray to Lombre, leading May to question what was so special about Lombre, which made Tallulah mad at the fact that Ash and the gang didn't know, and she explains that the village had been waiting for a Lombre to show up for a long time, adding that there was a Lombre that the village called the Great Lombre that would always arrive to restore the village back to its peak form whenever something bad happened to the village. Tallulah then went on to continue to pray to Lombre, calling it the Great Water Lord, as Ash asked why the town was waiting for Lombre this time, and this led Tallulah to reveal that they wanted to use Lombre to help them get rid of a Solrock that recently appeared in the village, calling it annoying as fuck. Brock wanted to know why Tallulah thought Solrock was annoying, leading her to reveal that a lot of misfortune that had befallen the town recently, such as the lack of water, was due to the Solrock bringing people bad luck, so she wanted to get rid of it. Just then, Ash and the gang was startled as Tallulah called out to several houses, telling the residents inside the houses to come out, revealing that the town was far from deserted. Everyone was just hiding in their homes. And one of the homes then opens up their door as several villagers come out of the same house, including a young woman and an old woman and an old man. The young woman happened to be Tallulah's granddaughter, Mary, who immediately rushed out to Tallulah to ask why she had called her, although before she could make it to Tallulah, Brock, who was instantly attracted to Mary, cut her off, approaching her, trying to gas himself up by stating that he owned Lombre, so therefore he had come purposely to this village to save the village from their bad luck, adding that he had traveled many, many miles. Mary was immensely confused with what the fuck Brock was going on about, although Max then stopped Brock from confusing her further, as he dragged him away by the ear, stopping him from simping. Soon enough, more villagers come out of their homes as well, and Tallulah points to Lombre, informing them all of it, as all the villagers excitedly crowd around it. Although, Mary stays back, Ash and the gang take the opportunity, with Mary not being enamored by the Lombre, meaning that she could talk to them, to, in fact, talk to her, asking why Tallulah and everyone in the town, it seemed to believe that Lombre would save Lombre would save them from Solrock's bad luck, although Mary was confused at this, admitting that she didn't understand why the village thought that Solrock gave bad luck. Ash and the gang and Mary then hear Tallulah declare that Lombre would single-handedly save the village from the drought that they were experiencing and return water to the village, which made Mary apologize on Tallulah's behalf, stating that she felt bad that Ash and the gang's Lombre was being crowded around by all of the village people. And she then officially introduced herself as Mary to Ash and the gang, and questions why they were in the village in the first place, as Max and May tiredly explained that they were looking for water. Kind of hesitant to even say this, since they knew that the village was probably also looking for water, since they probably didn't have any, because, there was a drought and all that. But, much to Ash and the gang's surprise, Mary took them inside her house and happily handed them some glasses of water, leading Ash and the gang to thank her, and her to state that it was no problem whatsoever. Which shocked Ash and the gang, because they thought it would definitely be a problem for Mary to give out some water if the village was experiencing a water shortage. So they asked if this water was in fact spring water, and Mary confirmed this, although also admitted that there was a water shortage, when she happened to be giving away some of her last supplies of water. Ash and the gang questioned if the spring was the village's only source of water, so that was why the drought was happening, and Mary confirmed this. Mary also explains that the spring Ash and the gang had come across earlier was also a shrine meant for the Lombre, known as the Great Lombre, that supposedly lived there. Also calling the Lombre by its other nickname, the Great Lombre Waterlord, adding that the Great Lombre Waterlord was supposed to watch over the village and make sure they always had water. However, some time ago, a meteorite fell one day near the shrine, and since that day, the Solrock had been spotted in the woods by the shrine, and immediately after Solrock showed up, after a little bit of time, it was then that the drought started, and the water in the spring dried up. So basically, the villagers thought that the water shortage had something to do with the meteorite they saw crash near the shrine, and since the Solrock had been wandering around the area, no rain had fallen. So basically, people thought that it was because of Solrock that the drought was occurring. It was mainly the meteorite's fault, but they believed that Solrock could have come from the meteorite, and therefore it was keeping the rain from falling because of it crashing on the meteorite. And she added that all the villagers were so angry that they want to get rid of Solrock by attacking it, so that the drought would hopefully end. Ash and the gang thought that Solrock was a problem as well upon hearing this, but Mary stated that she was actually sure that Solrock didn't mean any harm, suggesting that it probably just got lost when it crashed on the meteor and was trapped and unable to leave. So basically, she just thought it was solely the meteor's fault, not Solrock. Or, at the very least, there was a scientific explanation for why the meteor had caused the drought, as opposed to just Solrock being the sole reason. Suddenly, Ash and the gang and Mary heard the villagers chanting outside, and rushed to see them all standing with musical instruments, such as drums. Although the villagers, including Mary's grandma, started moving, and Mary's grandma explained that they were performing a rain dance as best they could, or at least the dancing part, so that they could motivate Lombre to do a rain dance, so that it could hopefully scare off the Solrock, since it was a rock type, and therefore the drought would come to an end, stating her continued belief that Solrock was evil. Ash and the gang and Mary proceeded to yell at Mary's grandma and the villagers, trying to explain that Solrock was not evil and did not cause the water shortage, with Ash also adding that there's no way Solrock could have been evil, since it saved his Pikachu against Team Rocket. And May defended Solrock as well, stating that if it was lost and in a strange environment after crashing with the meteor, then it was likely pretty scared, and said that she would feel scared too, and wouldn't appreciate people trying to harm it when she was already scared. And Mary suggested that her grandma and the villagers should stop acting so harsh towards the Solrock, and instead focus on further investigating what could actually be stopping the water in the meteorite, or also anything else that could be stopping the water that wasn't even the meteorite, still confident that it wasn't because of Solrock. Although Mary's grandma stated that they would just anger the Waterlord, Lombre, if they didn't try and take out the Solrock. Basically, she refused to believe that Solrock wasn't evil. Mary and her grandmother then get into a massive-ass argument, but Mary's grandmother eventually gets sick of arguing and gets the crowd excited to do a rain dance again, as they set Lombre on the shrine and begin to dance around it, hoping that it would unleash a rain dance. Ash and May did admit that they thought the tune that the villagers were making with the instruments was pretty catchy, and their dancing was pretty cool, although May doubted that the dancing would actually work. As for Brock, he took the opportunity, with everyone dancing, to try and get Mary to dance with him, but Max just pulled him away by the ear again. Ash and May were then surprised, as they remarked that Lombre actually seemed to be getting into the dancing as well, really liking it. Sure enough, much to all the villagers' excitement, Lombre started dancing, and it was very happily doing jumps on the shrine as well, really taking the dancing seriously, leading May to comment that Lombre could really dance, as Max wondered how Lombre had picked up its dancing abilities, with Brock lying that he had taught it, wanting to impress Mary. Mary's grandma was happy to see that Lombre was dancing, although she thought that Lombre would have to dance faster to activate the rain dance, so she told all the villagers to motivate it by dancing faster, and they did so. This made Ash and Pikachu even more impressed with all the dancing, and Pikachu was so impressed that it hopped off Ash's shoulder and began dancing as well. And much to Brock, May, and Max's joy, they saw a whole bunch of Blossom, Shroomish, and Seedot show up and start dancing as well as some Oddish. Lombre did in fact speed up as well, and as everyone else continued to speed up again and again and again, everyone tired themselves out, so they stopped dancing for a rest. And unfortunately, it hadn't started to rain yet. The sun was still shining brightly. Despite this, Mary's grandma and all the villagers didn't seem to care about this whatsoever, with Mary's grandma thinking that it would rain any second, although Ash and the gang, especially May, questioned what the point of all the dancing even was if it wasn't going to work, with Mary agreeing, saying that the dancing appeared to be pointless. Ash and the gang agreed with Mary's sentiment, and therefore they stopped dancing. Although Ash actually thought that they should keep dancing, and the villagers should as well, when he realized that Solrock could potentially show up after all the dancing and prove its innocence by acting nice around everybody, adding that Solrock would probably show up since a whole bunch of wild grass Pokemon had showed up to dance as well, so Solrock would probably be attracted to the dance. Although Brock stated that he actually believed Solrock wouldn't show up, reminding Ash that it could read minds, including the minds of the villagers, and if it saw that all the villagers didn't like it, it wouldn't come and dance with a group of people who hated it. To prove Brock's point that all the villagers hated Solrock, as if on cue, Mary's grandma stated how much she hated Solrock, stating her belief now that Solrock must have been using Sunny Day to prevent Lombre from using Rain Dance. Just then, though, Brock smiled to himself as he got an idea. He was just going to have all the villagers and Ash and the gang stop dancing and just have Lombre dance on its own, since Solrock likely wouldn't be scared of just Lombre, and it would be attracted to only Lombre's dancing and come over to it, as opposed to being scared away. However, when Brock suggested that the villagers stop dancing, Mary's grandma and the rest of the villagers obviously weren't fond of this idea. Although Brock mentioned to the villagers that if he had Lombre dance on its own, then it could potentially bring Solrock out and have it stop using Sunny Day. Basically, he knew that Solrock wasn't using Sunny Day, but he wanted to act like it was, since a lot of the villagers believed that it was, and he figured that he could get them on his side if he told them that it would stop using Sunny Day. And sure enough, a lot of the villagers stopped dancing when they heard this, and even though Mary's grandma still wasn't convinced, she stopped dancing as well, since everyone else had, and also Max had yelled at her to stop. So yeah, the important thing was the villagers had stopped dancing, allowing Brock to go through with his plan, as all the villagers and Mary's grandma, Mary, and Ash and the gang hid in the bushes as Lombre alone continued to dance, acting like it was by itself. Mary's grandma was still skeptical that this would work, but was praying it would work regardless, as Brock assured her that it would, as he remembered how Solrock may end up getting concerned seeing Lombre all alone, so it may go to talk to it, just like how it had seen Ash and the gang in danger and went to go save them, basically believing that it wanted to make Lombre happy if it saw it alone. Sure enough, Solrock then arrived near Lombre, and the two Pokemon started to have a conversation. Ash and the gang and everyone else simply watched patiently, waiting to see what would happen, when suddenly Skitty startled everyone as it randomly popped out of its Pokeball and ran off, leaving May and Mary to both go after it, following it through the forest until Skitty went into a dark cave, and May wondered what to do now, believing that she wouldn't be able to find Skitty in the cave since it was so dark. But Mary simply guided May into the cave, turning on a flashlight, stating that they could find Skitty with the help of it, and Mary promised to help May track Skitty down, since she apparently knew the layout of the cave very well, being from the area and all. And sure enough, after a bit of searching with the flashlight in the cave, May and Mary were able to find Skitty really quickly, although they saw that Skitty had actually ran to a water pump that had a red R on it, and it was sucking the water from the spring. Basically, the main spring where the water initially came from would lead into the shrine, but since all the water was being drained out through the pump, none of the water was making its way to the shrine. So, therefore, May and Mary saw that it wasn't Solrock that was causing the spring to go dry after all, but this machine. Who was operating the pump, you may ask? Well, if you remember from earlier in the episode, Team Rocket was draining out water from the spring, right? Well, yeah, they were using this pump to do that, so Solrock wasn't the culprit. It was, of course, Team Rocket. Who could have expected that? Anyways, Team Rocket was currently taking all the water they were draining and putting it in boxes and bottles so that they could sell it for a whole bunch of money. While Meowth and James were extremely pleased doing this operation, stating that it was very efficient since they had no expenses themselves. And they had no care in the world that they were currently depleting a village of its entire water supply. However, just as Team Rocket was talking about all the money they were going to make from selling all this water, Wobbuffet then popped out of his Pokeball and made a noise as he spotted something as he looked through some binoculars. And this led Meowth and Jessie to take the binoculars from Wobbuffet, and they spotted Lombre and Solrock talking at the spring. And therefore, Meowth suggested that they go over to the shrine and steal Solrock and Lombre. Jessie and James wondered why Meowth was so keen, leading Meowth to have a boss fantasy and explain his reasoning, stating that they could give Lombre to Giovanni, and Giovanni could use him as a portable sink, and Giovanni could use Solrock, if they captured it, to keep him warm and dry the water from his face after he washed it in Lombre's water. Jessie and James proceeded to have this boss fantasy as well, and therefore they got excited about getting promoted, since Giovanni would be so happy to have Solrock and Lombre. So with that, they cheered, deciding to steal Solrock and Lombre, as Wobbuffet popped out to cheer as well. Although, before they could go to steal Solrock and Lombre, it was then that May and Mary appeared out of the cave and demanded them to stop taking the water, realizing that Team Rocket was at fault. Meanwhile, Solrock had now started dancing with Lombre as Ash and the gang and the villagers, including Mary's grandmother, watched on, and Mary's grandmother was not happy to see Solrock dancing, believing that if Solrock was allowed to dance, the village would be cursed with even more sunlight, since she believed that if Solrock was happy, then it could release more sunny days. Even though Ash knew that Solrock wasn't the one behind the drought, he pretended like it was so as to not piss off Mary's grandmother, and stated that actually, if Solrock danced, it would probably end up feeling so happy that it would dance super fast, and therefore the dancing should hopefully promote Lombre to use rain dance. Having to come up with that excuse on the spot, since he figured that Mary's grandmother and the villagers would see that Solrock was innocent when it revealed itself, but it was only the opposite. They saw it as more dangerous. Unfortunately, everything Ash said went right in Mary's grandmother's ear and out the other, indicating that she didn't really care about anything Ash said, as she went up to all the villagers in the bushes and got them in a group before telling them that Solrock was there and had to be stopped. So they all jumped out from the bushes to attack Solrock. Ash tried to tell them to stop, but they wouldn't listen, as they were about to hit Solrock, but Solrock used Psychic to stop the villagers' attacks by lifting them up in the air. Ash, Brock, Max, and Lombre knew, though, that the villagers would just get more angry at Solrock if it continued to levitate them, so they managed to convince Solrock that the villagers weren't actually going to hurt it, and therefore it dropped all the villagers down to the ground, quitting its Psychic attack, per Ash, Brock, and Max's orders. Just as Solrock placed all the villagers and Mary's grandma on the ground extremely hard, though, May and Mary ran up and explained that Team Rocket had caused the drought and were stealing water from the spring and shit, and they try and go into more detail when suddenly Team Rocket crashes through the forest in a giant green mech, and they immediately say their motto while wearing classical Japanese costumes and declare their plan to steal Solrock and Lombre, as Meowth activates a switch that causes a net to come out of one of the arms of the mech, and it catches both Lombre and Solrock in the same net. Mary then yells at Team Rocket, demanding them to release Lombre and Solrock, as well as give back all the water, although Team Rocket of course refuses, so Brock simply has Lombre use Razor Leaf to free himself from the net, along with Solrock. Team Rocket was immensely surprised by this, although when Pikachu then went for Thunderbolt to blast Team Rocket off, Team Rocket deflected the Thunderbolt before it could get off, as Meowth pressed a button in the mech to fire a huge stream of water from a water gun on the mech that was situated on the mech's nose, to send Pikachu flying back, as Ash ran up to Pikachu to make sure he was okay. Just because Pikachu was down didn't mean that Team Rocket was stopping with firing the water gun on the mech, as now they tried to fire it straight at the villagers, who ran away in fear. They weren't gonna make it in time, however, but just then, Solrock jumped in front of the villagers to take the hit of the water for them. This worried Brock, because he pointed out that Solrock was a rock type, so water attacks would do plenty of damage. As for Mary's grandmother and the villagers, they were just in a state of pure amazement and shock that Solrock had actually saved them, realizing that maybe Solrock wasn't so bad after all. Just then, though, Solrock began to spin and heat up, much to Brock's amazement, as he remarked that Solrock was actually giving off so much heat that the water didn't even damage it now. That was fucking insane, though. Like, if it was so hot that water wasn't doing anything, that makes no sense, but I'm not gonna question it. Meowth decides to counter Solrock by simply turning up the pressure of the water, but this still did absolutely nothing on Solrock, and it began to fight through the water and charge towards Team Rocket's mech, and it soon slammed into it, blowing the mech back and severely damaging it. With the mech now knocked back and on the ground, this allowed Pikachu to send Team Rocket blasting off and blow up the mech with a Thunderbolt, pissing especially Meowth off, because when he blasted off, he tried to cheer himself up by thinking of the boss fantasy with Giovanni and getting Solrock and Lombre to him, but when he realized that they no longer had Solrock and Lombre, this boss fantasy just made him even more pissed off. Everyone cheered at the fact that Team Rocket was gone, but just then, everyone panicked as they saw that Solrock now couldn't stop spinning, and it was giving off so much power from its spin that it couldn't control itself, and it started to essentially turn into a floating fireball, because it was so hot from the spinning. Also, the air began to get a lot warmer because of the immense heat that Solrock was emitting, and this heat eventually caused some bushes that were near Mary's grandma to go on fire, and everyone panics, obviously. And they panic even more as Solrock then spins out of control straight towards the village, which meant that it was about to burn down the village, which obviously made everyone really concerned. So Mary's grandmother pleaded with Brock to save the village, obviously not wanting all the homes to be destroyed. So Brock obliges and takes action, telling his Lombre to use water gun on Solrock, although the fire was too intense, so the water gun didn't do anything. So Brock thought that he needed double the water gun power, sending out his Mudkip to use water gun as well. Thankfully, both Lombre and Mudkip combined were able to cool down Solrock, also causing steam to rise into the air as Solrock stopped being on fire, and the steam mixed with the clouds to create the rain clouds in the sky, and immediately after this, it began to rain. And the rain poured extremely hard, also due to the increase of heat in the air, as Ash and the gang, Mary, and all the villagers cheered. Also, Solrock had stopped spinning now that the heat had calmed down, and it was able to control itself again, as it went back to Lombre and danced with him again, making Mary very overjoyed that Solrock was now happy again, and she was even more happy, along with the rest of the villagers, when they saw that the rainwater had filled the spring again. In order to celebrate this, all the villagers began to dance around the spring, and Solrock and Lombre joined them. And then, all the villagers, including Mary's grandma, get on their knees to give thanks to Lombre and Solrock, though primarily actually Solrock. Then, when the rain eventually stopped, all the villagers began to get a whole bunch of water from the spring and place it in buckets. The drought was finally over. Mary then goes up to Ash and the gang as they were watching all the villagers grab water and thank them for all their help, with Brock starting to flirt with her, offering to stay in the village and have Lombre protect the village. But as Brock continued to go on about this, he realized that Mary had not even heard what he just said and had already walked away, making him very sad as he pouted. It turns out that Mary had went over to her grandmother, who was declaring something to the entire village, being that since Lombre couldn't actually bring them rain, she had realized that Lombre didn't actually need to represent their village anymore, and having it be their hero was pointless. And suggested that instead they have the Soul Rock as their representation for the village, since it actually helped make the rainstorm. And she then took off her lily pad hat to reveal a headband with a Soul Rock on it instead. So now she was going to have a Soul Rock hat instead of a Lombre lily pad, and officially declared Soul Rock as the new sacred guardian of their village and the spring. And then Mary's grandma gave Soul Rock headbands to all the other villagers to make Soul Rock officially their new representation, as everyone now wore Soul Rock headbands, which made Mary sigh, thinking that they were going a little overboard, but at the end of the day she was happy that the villagers at least didn't hate Soul Rock anymore. Mary then turns her attention back to Brock, questioning if he even said anything, not even hearing anything that he said, which made Brock sad as he lowered his head, ashamed to even face her. Although, Mary then remembered what Brock had said, being that he wanted to stay with his Lombre to protect the village, although she then stated to Brock that since Lombre was no longer the protector of the village, Brock could simply just continue to travel with his gang. Brock didn't want to keep looking like a depressed loser, so he tried to be happy, but he couldn't help it and ducked his head down in sadness again. Ash and the gang then say goodbye to Mary, her grandmother, and all the villagers, as the villagers thank them for their help. So the episode ends with Ash and the gang departing on the trail to Petalburg City once again, as Soul Rock sat happily watching over the village from the shrine. Right over the spring.